I'm Gary Nickerson.
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
And this is Outside My Window. Our guest for this chat is Phil Demille. Phil is a lifelong music lover. He had a music retail store with his wife for over 20 years. He's played in the band Hourglass for over 50 years and has written many songs and published several records and CDs. Phil still plays a lot, and Hourglass just put out a new CD, and it's getting great reviews and airplay on several FM stations. As Phil would say, life is good. He's very thankful. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you very much, Gary.
So music has been such an important part of your life. Why?
I guess the main reason would be from early childhood. I grew up in a home where there was always music on the go. My mother was Irish, and she did a lot of singing, and my father was a harmonica player. He did a lot of singing. And whenever we had family get-togethers, there was, sing-along events all through the year, especially during holiday seasons. And I grew up, my fondest memories, go way back to when I was 4 or 5 years old, and the family was very much involved in music from that point onward, really.
So you were always very comfortable standing up in front of people and performing, if I can use that term.
That's a real tough question. I'm not sure if I'm totally comfortable. Anytime we play anywhere or anytime I play anywhere, even in church, I have a certain sort of nervousness, I guess, that it doesn't disappear. I think the main thing is that you're concerned about how things go. You just hope that things go well, and I think you're concerned about that. It's not a fear. It's more of a concern for trying to do your best and hoping that things will go well.
What about genres? Like what kind of genre of music have you been exposed to over the years? I mean, you mentioned your mother was Irish, so obviously that puts it into a certain demographic.
Yes, it does. At that time, of course, my mother was a new Canadian, a war bride, and she brought with her, of course, music from her homeland, and there was a great deal of music from the war years that was played in our home as well. As years went on, I got more involved with school plays and musicals and Christmas concerts and that sort of thing through elementary school. And it just kind of evolved from there. I had a real love for music even as a small child. I had a love for music from the late 50s. And got into the 60s, and when the Beatles came along, that had a lifelong impact, and I was just absolutely blown away by their music, and I still am to this day. I think they've had tremendous influence over all types of music in the last 50 years.
What was your first instrument that you played?
Well, I'm not really much of an instrument player anyway. I play a bit of guitar, I play harmonica, I play some keyboard. I took piano lessons when I was a kid, but at that point I was only interested in baseball. I mean, it was kind of a secondary thing. I went because my parents wanted me to take lessons, basically. I was.
Well, that's usually how it starts, right?
That's right, yeah. But the interest was there, and I played a bit of, as I say, piano, keyboard, and so on throughout junior high and high school, I guess. And then when I went away to school, I picked up guitar. I never really played guitar at all before, I guess I was about 17 when I really actually picked up a guitar for the first time, and learned some basic chords and gradually worked from there. And I've played harmonica for a long time as well. I guess that comes from my father's influence. He was a much better harmonica player than I would ever hope to be.
So, putting the Beatles aside for a second, who or which band would have been a big influence on the way in which you approach music today?
Oh boy, where do I begin? all the British invasion bands were all major influence, because we were all high school kids, and on the weekend, we got together and listened and or played, British invasion music, and I guess later on it was the music of people like Red, Bachman Turner Overdrive, and just a wide variety of stuff. Then the folk era with Cat Stevens and James Taylor and people like that. I always loved their stuff. And more recently, I would say the music of the last decade has had less influence over the kind of stuff that we do, because I really haven't followed it that closely. I've been so busy playing myself, I really haven't had a chance to follow up on it as much as I should have. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but it's kind of a wide variety.
Yeah,
okay,
no,
it's kind
exactly.
of a wide variety of stuff. And, blues, rock, not really heavy stuff, but, popular type pop rock and folk music, and just a wide variety of stuff.
I think some folks would pay good money to see you lay down a rap.
Yeah. Well, I hope they don't hold their breath on that.
The challenge is out there now.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
Phil, did you have any formal vocal training?
No, I never did.
Wow.
No.
You just in the blood, eh? It just came natural.
Well, I guess. Well, again, going back to my family, just so much music, and you were encouraged, or I was encouraged right from the time I was 4, to participate, to sing along, and so on. I was on CJLS when I was 5.
Wow.
Part of the Uncle Bob Birthday Club.
Oh, yes.
Oh, my Lord, yes.
Yeah, in fact, I think I sang on there a couple of times.
So, do you remember the first time you sang in front of people other than your family? What's your earliest recollection, Phil?
I would say Christmas concerts at school. And that would have been back in even Pembroke School before I went to Hebron. We had, Christmas concerts in those days, in the late 50s, early 60s. They were big deals. I mean, they brought out the whole community. And I can remember singing in some of those, and also church events, Christmas concerts there as well. And they were big events in those days compared to what they would be today. So those would be the first experiences that I would have had singing outside of the family.
So speaking of family, what about the rest of your family? I mean, your mom and dad was one thing, but what about the extended family that went along with it? Did they have any musical talent or singing talent too?
I have a lot of cousins, especially, who play and sing. I don't have any brothers and sisters, so that part is not a part of the picture at all. But
you didn't have to worry about any competition either.
No, that's right. I was either the best or the worst.
Or both at the same time.
Or both at the same time. That's right. The music is a big part of the family, I would say. Through and certainly my relatives in Ireland. I met them for the first time in 1999, and they all play music. And
wow.
They're some good musicians too, I'll tell you. There are 2 twin sisters who are really, one of them especially, she's very good. And they play, oddly enough, they play a lot of their own Irish music, of course, but they play a lot of the music that we play here as well, So that part of that side of the family, my mother's side of the family, certainly music is major with them.
So what about family get-togethers today? Is it still music as a cornerstone?
Family get-togethers today are much less common, number one. I mean, they used to be a very regular thing. Now they are not, for, I guess, a variety of reasons. It's not that people don't want to get together, but people get busy with their own lives today, and it's just a different feel, I think, for those kinds of activities compared to a generation ago. Again, the small community was major in the days of, say, 50s and 60s, even into the 70s. Today, small communities all move into the larger areas for their recreation. That's just my own, personal opinion, but I've observed that happening much more commonly, in recent years than it was say in the case of people living 35, 40 years ago.
I mean, certainly we're known for the kitchen party atmosphere. I
Yes,
mean,
yes.
do,
And the new kitchen party atmosphere has really taken off, and that's so nice to see because, like these community halls for years just sat there empty. And now, all of a sudden, they're back and they're vibrant again. Well, COVID has kind of put an interruption on that, but I'm sure that once, we get over that stumbling block, I think things will continue because there was a real enthusiasm for the kitchen parties in, various communities in and around Yarmouth.
well, COVID certainly took the kitchen party online because there's a couple of
It
groups
certainly did.
online that are just booming. They've got tons and tons and tons of viewers, watching people do their own numbers online. It's been fantastic to watch.
I know it has. So again, that's a positive, I guess. If we have to, think of a positive in connection with COVID, that would be one because people did have a chance to, to perform in that manner, and otherwise, perhaps that never would have happened.
But and the same for some of the quote unquote professional musicians as well. I mean, Burton Cummings does an online thing. I don't know if he's still doing it or not, but he used to do like a weekly chat session, and he'd play a couple of songs, and I know that Brian Adams has done the same thing, and so on. Names that we would remember, as well as hopefully some of the younger crowd will remember as well.
Sure,
and
sure.
It's given them an opportunity to reach out into their fan base in a way they hadn't explored from before,
and doing so without a lot of touring, which that's a killer after a while. Those guys, some of them go on the road for months at a time, and they are physically and mentally exhausted at the end of it for months on end. They can't really do much of anything. It's kind of a recovery period at the end of each tour. So with that aside, the video part of it has I think helped them and made them stronger over a longer period.
I know I follow Christopher Cross online,
Yes.
and he actually contracted COVID, and his recovery was lengthy, and the disease was debilitating to him almost. But he's managed to do a recovery. He's actually back touring again now that he's allowed. It's great. I mean, you take somebody from the '80s that yeah, I guess you'd almost classify him as a one-hit wonder, but not quite. But he's
a talented guy.
He is.
Cross, that's for sure. Yeah.
And usually he has Michael McDonald with him as well, which is another great musician to watch and listen to, and it's great to see that he's been able to do that. But you get the opportunity, if technology has done anything, it's given us the opportunity to be able to follow these folks a little better than watching CNN.
That's right. I agree for sure. I think it's done wonders for a lot of the people that otherwise would not have had the opportunity to really do much of anything during COVID.
Phil, you spoke about the revitalization of community halls like the one in Pembroke and so many others. Can you talk, because you know firsthand, about the importance of these, small communities in rural Nova Scotia and the important role they play in keeping music alive? Well,
I've always felt that was more of a regional thing than what people perhaps treat it as. In other words, there are some parts of the province, I feel, where there's a tremendous amount of local support for local musicians. And then there are other parts of the province and other parts of other areas that there's very little support. And in an area where there's very little support for the local talents, whatever they may be, those individuals tend in general not to go far. If you know what, if I'm making any sense. I'm thinking, for an instance now, I can remember when we were doing battles of the bands at the high school. Bands like Winter Sleep. I was there to hear Winter Sleep the first time they played together on stage. And I don't mind saying that I've heard better bands. Now, they were good kids, don't get me wrong, but I didn't really feel at the time that they really had much of a future. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm just saying that they, to me, appeared to be very much run-of-the-mill. Boy, was I wrong. But I was wrong only in one sense, because the other part of it was they were able to, they were given a chance, I guess is my point. They were given a chance to show what they could do. And they worked hard and they tried hard and they went other places. They gained popularity in other places, and that stood by them. And before I knew it, they were famous, you know. And we've had a few of those over the years, but perhaps not as many as we should have had. You know, when, for instance, Vic Mullen, when we gave him his award for lifetime achievement down on the waterfront, to my knowledge, it was the first time he was ever really given anything locally to recognize his lifelong achievements in the music business. And he's one of the biggest names in the entire country.
That's a surprise.
Yeah, and he told me that himself, so I mean, it's no secret. I said, have you ever been recognized locally for the things that you've done, Vic? And he said, no, never. I said, you're joking. I said, you're kidding me. He said, no. And, you know, I think sometimes we've missed opportunities with people locally who have done so well. And I'm just citing two examples, two complete opposites, really, between Winter Sleep and Vic Mullen. I mean, they're worlds apart in their music, but yet they've done well. And I think there are many, many more over the years. The Ferraris, for instance, at that point in time, they had a local support group. There's no question that they did. I mean, I was there the night they left Yarmouth to move to the States, and you know, they had the community, or a part of the community, behind them. And they had to work their heads off in order to make a success of it, but they did so. And you know, you need that local support in order to have enough confidence to go the next step, I guess is the point.
Do you think maybe the opposite is true as well, Phil? I mean, in communities where they have a vibrant local music scene, that they just take it for granted?
Well, it could be, but I mean, I look at Cape Breton, and I say this to praise them, not to condemn them, but they support anything that's local. They really do. And you know, as someone who comes out as a budding musician in any part, I shouldn't say any part, in most of Cape Breton, are encouraged to go as far as they can go by their local community, and many of them have. They play their music locally, they promote their music locally, and the next thing you know, they move a step beyond that, and they go on a provincial scale and maybe maritime scale, and maybe perhaps beyond that, national and eventually international. I mean, there are so many musicians over the years, when you think about it, who've come from Newfoundland and from Cape Breton, and you know, compared to other parts of the Maritimes. And a large part of it, I believe, has to do with the amount of local support that they've had.
That local support, Phil, I mean, local communities, local governments, you know, festival associations, what have you. They've had plenty of opportunity over the years to learn from these other communities the importance of supporting local. Certainly through the Coal Shed Music Festival, my gosh, and we're going to talk about that, certainly. You know, Music Nova Scotia, who hosted here, what, two or three times. So do you see, from a musician standpoint, that anything has improved as far as community support or government support is concerned?
It may have. I'm not sure that I can really answer that with any real substance. It seems to me like it, and I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. I mean, I know that people are trying their best, but I think there's a great deal more effort and work that needs to be done to recognize what's local. I can remember, for instance, and I'm not going to get into names here, but I'll give you, so you're going to talk a bit about the festival. I'll cite one example of something that happened at the festival one day. There was a little girl up on the stage performing, and I always tried to give a certain amount of time each day for kids to perform. Some of them were really good, some of them were not really good. But I had a lady come over to me during this young lady's performance, and she said, "Don't you screen these people before they get up there?" And I was really blown away by that. I didn't know if I dared answer, but I tried to answer in as tactful way as I knew how. And I said, "Look, I don't have time to screen people here in any division, much less the youth division, because these kids they need to be given a chance. If it doesn't work out for them, that's fine. But at least if they're given a chance, they have something to sort of work from." But I think a lot more has to be done there to, again, going back to what we said before, you kind of put aside your prejudices and say, okay, this little kid is up there, she's 12 years old or she's 10 years old or whatever. Maybe she needs some voice training. Maybe she's not playing her instrument all that well, but she's always got the enthusiasm, or certainly shows that she has a love for whatever she's doing. Maybe it's just going to take a little more time for her or him or whoever. I think there needs to be more of that. Music in the schools, I think, needs to be treated with more recognition, I guess. Again, going back to that word, it has to be more a part of the regular program. Most kids, I shouldn't say most, but many kids go through school and never take any music at all.
So that young girl, Phil, she's going to remember that for the rest of her lives. Whether she sung well or not, she's going to tell her kids and her grandkids. That's what's really
sure.
important, isn't it?
I think it is. And again, as I said, I think we are sometimes too quick to judge a single performance, especially in the early stages, when in fact that performance is being affected by, so many things. If that child is new to that experience, they're going to be a bit afraid. They're going to be nervous. They're certainly not going to perform to their potential, not even close. And a lot of times we are too quick to judge, and sometimes that can be damaging.
Well, I would say to that lady that if she's expecting perfection, she's never been to karaoke night.
Well, again, just to go on with what I followed up with there, again going back to the festival, in a typical night, we might have, for instance, 5 different solo artists or groups to perform in a typical night from, let's say, 6 through to 10 or 10:30 or whatever it might be, and it's interesting to watch kind of the trends of the audience, because if there happens to be a particular group that's better known than the others and they perform at 9 o'clock, people by I guess human nature will come in to watch them, and they don't really pay a lot of attention sometimes to the ones who are on before or after. And it's unfortunate, because in many cases those other groups are better. And I don't say that as any no reflection on anyone, but I think it's important that we give everybody a fair chance, is what I'm getting at, I guess.
Yeah, and that also was my comment about karaoke night, because certainly in that particular scenario, it's about having fun. It's not necessarily how well you can sing, because certainly that didn't ever work well for me. But looking at the quote unquote bar scene, I mean, certainly back in the day, you had the Clipper, you had Captain Kelly's, you had the Red Knight, a couple of those of which would always have bands. Kelly's wasn't much of a band place, but certainly the Clipper and the Red Knight were. And although the Red Knight still has the odd band now and again, I mean, that scene, quote unquote, is basically kind of gone off the wayside. You're not doing,
no question.
And you're not doing bands at the arena anymore. I mean, again, the Mariner Center has managed to bring in a few acts over the past few years, and so what's the outlet like for somebody that's looking to kind of crack into the local music scene? Is it all online now in order for that to happen?
No, I wouldn't say it's all online, but it has a lot to do with the size of your group. Whether if you're a 4 or 5 piece band, for instance, your opportunities are very, very limited, especially if you're not willing to travel.
Right.
If you're willing to travel, you can definitely pick up more work. But if you are, let's say, a single or a duo, again, you'll pick up more work compared to if you were a larger group. So the market is so different from what it was back in the 70s and 80s, for instance, where you could play 6 nights a week and you could choose where you wanted to play. I mean, that's no exaggeration. It was that busy in those days. And that certainly changed in the last, roughly the last 20, 25 years, I suppose. Now that's all basically gone. The idea of 6 nights a week. At one time, there was 6 nights a week at the Grand, 6 nights a week at the Red Knight, and that went on for a number of years in the 70s. It was just nonstop. And you could drop into those places on a typical Tuesday night, for instance, and the place was 3/4 full. On the weekend, it was packed.
Yeah.
But again, that whole level of activity changed, and I guess for a whole lot of reasons, and it just isn't there. You're absolutely right. It isn't there anymore. So you have to be creative today in trying to, locate places. There's still a niche for entertainment, and whether online certainly is one of them. But a lot of the small places, a lot of the restaurants, for instance, they're hiring entertainment now. The days of going out to play from 10 until 2 are gone for the most part, but they have been replaced by places who are hiring from 6 until 8:30 or whatever. That's all.
Right.
That's all very, very different, which is nice for guys like me because I don't have to arrive home 4 o'clock in the morning.
Well, 9 o'clock's my bedtime, Phil. So 6 to 8:30 fits right in.
I understand totally, for sure. But I remember a good many times we would be playing, 2.5 to 3 hours drive away from here, and having to load a truck at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and drive home. Before sleep was even part of it at all.
Yeah.
So, and that's the way bands were in those days, but that's all changed for sure.
But this is also where festivals come into play as well, because it gives people that exposure. So, I mean, you were talking earlier about like a 4-band night. I mean, that could be the first opportunity that some of these younger bands have at a real audience and being on stage.
Yes, we try as hard as we can to accommodate as many people as we can accommodate in the 9 days that we have during the festival, whether it be a solo act or whether it be a group. We try to accommodate as many as we can, and it's turned into something that I think needs to continue long into the future, long after I'm gone, and hopefully other people will take it over eventually and make it a big deal, because it by no means is it as big as it could be right now, and we're 9 days. It should take the full month of August. And I know some people look at me like I'm crazy when I say that, but if it were handled in the right way, if it were financed in the right way, and if it had the community support that it needs behind it, it could become much bigger than it is right now. And,
but even then, you're still turning away acts, aren't you?
Oh yes, absolutely. Well, one of the problems is the timing, and I'm trying my best to explain that to people. I'll have people who will call me up, for instance, in June and say, "Well, I suppose it's almost time you started to organize the festival."
Oh yeah.
Well,
right.
The festival's been long since totally planned and scheduled long before June, even though it doesn't take place until August.
Yeah, exactly.
Because once the Christmas season is over, we're definitely into high gear as far as organizing our schedule. And come, let's say late March or late February, early March, most things are pretty much tied up at that point, and we get the odd thing that might be a cancellation, or somebody can't make it for whatever reason, and we'll make some adjustments accordingly. But certainly, I would never want to think that I was into June and July and still trying to schedule
Oh my Lord!
Events for the festival, because I have to track down all my sponsors. I have to do all the logistics of how the thing runs. The festival, guys, is nearly a full-time job. People have no idea, unless they've done it themselves. They have no idea what is involved. You're just every day we're on the phone, we're sending emails, we're getting emails, we're doing Facebook messages, and so on, constantly, and not just people within Nova Scotia. But,
No.
we're getting more and more inquiries from the States, more and more inquiries from all over Canada. And, we try to accommodate as many as we can with the resources that we have.
And you've got the
So
advantage
that's
of
where that
technology.
stands.
And you've got the advantage of technology, right? I mean, you can do emails, you can do website checks and Facebook and stuff like that. I remember back, in the day when we had the big air shows, and
Yes.
I was part of that committee. And I mean, you're doing phone calls and writing letters,
Oh, yes.
let
Oh,
alone
yes.
anything else. And it's like you're doing your planning a year in advance. I mean, you have
Well,
to.
that's the thing. And I think that, if you've gone through the organizational end of anything, you can appreciate what I'm saying about that part of it. It's much more important than the average person realizes unless they've been a part of that experience themselves.
Can you talk about those early years, the formative years, and the challenges and lessons learned? I know it wasn't easy, the first getting the thing off the ground, because we talked about that years ago.
Yeah, well, the festival started in 2007, and I'm trying to sort of piece together some of the things that led up to it. There was some conversation that took place in 2006 between members of council and myself, and I open my big mouth a lot of times and get myself in trouble by doing so. But my comment at the time to the folks involved in council was that I felt Yarmouth had one of the nicest waterfronts in the province, and it was sitting there, and it might have been used one weekend for the entire summer. For the most part, it was sitting there with nothing going on. And I don't say that to be mean. I'm saying I'm trying to paint a positive picture and point out that it could be better. That's what I was trying to do. And so one or two of the councillors and people at the time said, well, would you be interested in doing something down there? I said, just give me the go-ahead and I will certainly do it. So based on that, we approached our first festival in 2007. Now, it was much, much smaller and much shorter time frame than what it is now. But I think it proved to the people on the fringes, the doubters, I think it proved to them that this event had all kinds of promise. And next thing I knew, it evolved into, first it was 3 days, then it was 6 days, and now it's 9 days. And 9 days is definitely not enough to do all that needs to be done. But again, you have to be sensible, and I refuse to charge admission because I don't think that's part of the picture. So we therefore have to raise enough in the way of sponsor money in advance to make sure that we've got enough to pay our bills. And beyond that, what we try to do through our donations is raise adequate funds so that we can help to finance some of the breakfast programs in the local schools. And in the last, I guess it's 3 years now, or 3 years, we've been able to raise somewhere in the area of $7,000 per year for the school programs locally, and we're hoping to expand that as years go on. So it's just the kind of thing which, I have a friend who runs a business on Main Street, and he has told me more than once that his busiest time period during the entire year are the 3 weeks in August when the festival is on. And he runs a retail business. He has no reason to tell me that if it's not true. So I'm saying that everyone stands to benefit when activities are taking place, in the local community, and it doesn't shortchange anyone. It benefits everyone.
And the support from local businesses has it's always been there, hasn't it? I mean,
Oh, yes.
obviously it had to grow and develop over the years, but these businesses who have struggled in the past and are struggling now, and I know when the next festival comes along, that I'm sure they'll be there for you.
I sure hope so, because I still have to pay the bills.
That's right.
But yes, I'm convinced that they will be, because I think they all know in their own mind how important it is for everyone's future. So I can recall. I'm not going to certainly mention names, but I can recall one business in particular, and someone suggested to me that I should approach them, and I thought, gee whiz, that's unlikely that they would be interested in this kind of an activity, because it seemed to be kind of far-fetched from what they are all about. And was I ever wrong? They have now become one of our major sponsors. So, it's just, it's a real education in and of itself, being part of this festival. I can't say enough positive about the whole experience. It's just, and it continues. It's not something that, you shoot at once and it's over. I think you just keep building on the experiences of the past and trying to improve in the areas which need improvement and so on.
So with these uncertain times, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but kind of looking in that crystal ball, if you will, for the next Coal Shed Music Festival, and organizing that.
You're asking me what the dates are? Is that what you mean, or?
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that it's always the 3 weeks, or the 3 weekends, I should say, before Labor Day. If you'll just hold on for 2 seconds, I'll grab a calendar here, and I can tell you the tentative dates. Now, obviously, this has to go through, steps of approval and so on, but the dates that we're hoping to schedule, the 2022 festival, start on August 12th of 2022. They go the 12th, 13th, 14th, the 19th, 20th, 21st, and the 26th, 27th, and 28th, which leads up to the following weekend, I do believe, is Labor Day weekend. Yes, it is. Yeah, which would be September 5th. And the 3 weekends prior to Labor Day are the ones that we have found to be the most effective and the most productive.
What kind of a response are you getting so far from those groups and musicians that perhaps you've reached out to already? Just kind of giving them the heads up.
Well, I'll put it to you this way: I'm getting calls now. Can you schedule me? And I'm telling people, no, I cannot schedule, and I will not schedule anyone until after Christmas, because that gives us the fall to find out if there are any, new regulations that we have to be aware of. And now with the COVID being on the go, there may very well be some things that we need to introduce for the first time. And just to know where our sponsorship is going to be at that point and so on, then we can go beyond and start booking. But I don't want to start making promises to people now until I know where we stand.
Now, you can't run a festival like this, or any type really, without volunteers. And we know that you and your wife have both put in countless numbers of hours over the years to make this happen. But if somebody's interested in pitching in and helping out, what's the best way for them to reach out to you, Phil?
They just need to let me know.
Okay.
And I've never, people have criticized us for not making more of an effort to gather a whole group of volunteers. And, that may be a fair criticism. I'm not sure. But I want to know, I guess, before I get someone involved as a volunteer, I want to feel confident that what they tell me is going to happen, if you know what I mean. There are some people, we've had experience, for instance, in not only with the festival, but with other things over the years, where someone will come forward and say, "Oh, you can count on me," and then you never see them again. Or you may give them some little basic task to perform, and they come back with a dozen excuses that they were not able to see it through. So, on the other hand, we have some other volunteers who are as faithful as can be. They're there whenever we ask them to be, and they do all that they can do and more to help us out. So I would be happy if we had a dozen good, solid, reliable volunteers that we could call on for one of a dozen and one different jobs that happen throughout, not only throughout, but leading up to the festival and the activities, because it does get to be cumbersome, during the festival itself. We spend the better part of 10 to 12 hours per day, each day of the festival on site, because I feel that I have the responsibility of being there, But at the same time, you can't be everywhere at once. And sometimes we had, for instance, 2 years ago when we had the festival, we had as many as 3 activities happening at the same time. We had the Rudders tent. We had our own tent over on the coal shed stage, and we had another location in the Killam building, where there were 3. Sometimes I think there was even a 4th, because we were using upstairs of Rudders on a couple of occasions. But we were, in other words, spreading ourselves very, very thin, making sure that all of these workshops and that sort of thing were happening without a lot of catches. And we were really short on volunteers, and we didn't realize it, I guess, until we got into those things. So, and I want to do those things more, but I want to also make sure that the next time we have enough volunteers to cover all the bases.
And not to sound out there or anything else, but you're not a spring chicken anymore, Phil.
No, I'm 75 years old.
You can only survive so many 12-hour days.
Well, you forget what I did for a living for 30 plus years.
I was just going to say
10-hour days. There were the light duty ones.
Yeah.
I used to get such a kick out of people who would say, "Well, it must be nice you guys have the summer off." If I could get a long weekend off when I was at the school, I considered that a good year.
Yes.
And I'm not exaggerating. I don't know what it's like now, but I know what it was like then. And the idea of getting the summer off was not a part of my experience, I can tell you that. Especially in the last 15 years as principal, I was there. I was just there 6 days a week.
Well, and that's the thing, what people see and what their perception of what's going on isn't really the reality of it, is it?
And that goes for so many things, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah, yeah.
If you look at something and say, well, that person's pretty lucky. Walk in their shoes for a few days before you make that comment.
Absolutely.
It may not be as easy as it looks.
Absolutely. And one thing, again, if COVID's taught us anything, is that, mental health is and should be a priority for a lot of people. I mean, it's fine. You can put on a nice, brave face, but you never know what people are going through.
Well, that's very, very true. And you need to... you need to gain people's trust, I think, in order to kind of go into that level of a relationship with anybody. It's just, we're all guilty, I think, of being too quick to judge other people, whether it applies to the music business or anything else. It's I know I've had people say, "Oh boy, look at that guy! Look at the money he's making." Well, yeah, but have you thought about doing his job?
Yeah, exactly. I know one thing that's always brought me joy and helped keep me sane, I guess, if you can use that word and me in the same sentence, has been music. It's always been one of my cornerstones. My dad played in a band. He played guitar. He played sax.
I know your dad very well.
And
great guy.
It's always been part of my life that way, and then of course Mom used to work in the music store in Music Village, and so we always had music in the house, and it was one of the only reasons I ever got invited to parties when I was younger, is because I had all the music.
Well, that's a good reason to be invited.
It sure is. And
sure.
So for me, there's nothing like going to see a band live. I mean, you can sit and you can
totally
listen
agree.
to CD all you want, but boy, I'll tell you, you go out and you see them live, that's the thing.
I completely agree with that. And, over the years, whenever there was an opportunity to see people that I've really liked and admired, I made the effort to do it. And I was never disappointed.
It was interesting. I want to go back to what you were talking about as you grew up with music, and Quinn was talking about having music in his life. Now, I was an only child. Well, I still
Me
am.
too.
And so, and believe it, a little bit shy, perhaps some socially awkward, and all of that, especially when I was younger. But I always had adults around. My mother and father were involved for 50 years in square dancing. My mother was a caller, and Dad helped teach. So there was always music. It may not have been my favorite kind of music, but I learned to like all genres of music and had those people around me. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Whether it doesn't matter what kind of music it is, it just draws people together on a whole different level, doesn't it?
Well, I think I agree completely, and I think music being all that it is will draw all different personalities and all different types of people together. And I know in our own case, we have made so many good friends, lifelong friends through our music experience. The festival, for instance, we've made so many friends that we never otherwise would have even met. If it hadn't been for the festival happening. So yeah, there's no question that it does impact one's life in so many ways, and it gains a whole new group of acquaintances and friends and so on that otherwise you never would have.
So Hourglass, as we mentioned in the introduction, been around for over 50 years. Wow! And you put out a new CD.
Yes,
Talk
we
about
did.
that and what's contained in it. I know
Well,
music.
yeah, yeah, right. Well, over the years, I've written a fair amount of stuff, music over the years, a number of songs and so on, and with different groups. The very first group that I ever recorded with was back in the '70s, and that was with Bob LeBlanc, Glenn Thorburn, and Vince Beeler. We were a four-piece group, and we recorded at Music Stop at Solar Studios, and it was just a wonderful experience because I had never been in a recording studio before, of course, and it just taught us so much. And that was a time when music was a major part of so many people's lives. And we come out of that experience, and it was a learning experience, but yet it was a something that encouraged us to move on and do more things. And of course, being what it is at that time, the band eventually did, that particular combination did change because of job commitments and people moving and so on. But it gave, I think, all of us an incentive to do more. So over the years, I've done, I guess, 3 other CDs, and then this one in the past year. And with COVID, of course, we were kind of out of business as far as doing anything live. And 2 of us in the group, Andy Elliott and I, are both writers, and he had some songs, and I had some songs, and we thought, well, we really need to spend more time on this part of our music instead of just doing cover stuff all the time, because when you go out and play, you can't get away with playing all original stuff. We don't have that kind of population in this type of area. If we were in the city, you might be able to, but not here. So you tend to spend more of your time doing cover material than you do on your own. But since that part of our experience was pretty much brought to a standstill over COVID, we tended to spend more and more of our time on our original songs. And then we had someone move here from Thunder Bay, Ontario, and that was Greg McIntosh, and he started a studio here, and I got to know him through the festival. And, we talked several times about the idea of recording, and eventually it started to happen. So over a period of several months, we visited his studio on a regular basis, and we started to work on our material. The material is a wide variety of stuff, I would say. I'm really pleased with the response that we've received from a number of stations throughout the Maritimes. Mostly the stuff that's, I guess you would say, sort of Celtic in the style that some of them are written. There's some are more pop rock type of stuff, and a lot of folk and a little bit of blues as well. But the commentary that we're getting back from these places, I can speak for myself at least, I've never received before. It's very, very positive and very encouraging. So it has a total of 12 songs, and I wrote 6, and Andy wrote 6. And there are 2 songs in particular that deal with the fishing industry in southwest Nova Scotia, and those 2 in particular have received a lot of positive comment. and some of the others on the CD as well that are more of a folk. There's one that Andy wrote called what is it? I'm just looking here on the back of the CD. Will I See You Again? And that's a very popular one as well. We've had a lot of really good comments on that one. To read over, sit down and listen to the CD. There are no two songs that are similar. They're all very different, and it's a nice to me at least. It's a nice cross section of what the group can do. Andy's a great musician. He plays banjo, mandolin, bass, lead guitar, acoustic guitar, and so on. And so, and of course, Clark Blanchard is a great keyboard player as well. And so, they add a lot to the group. There's no question about that. I mean, as far as musicianship goes, they're far better than I would ever hope to be. But, put those pieces together, and what you have is the result of what the band is all about now. Everything from a little bit of blues to a little bit of folk, and some contemporary and Celtic in the content as well. That's about all I can tell you. Other than, I don't know if you've listened to it or not, if you had a chance to listen to it, but I always welcome comments from people, and I know you leave yourself wide open when you do that, because I tell people, everybody the same. I'm not just looking for positive, I'm looking for everything. If you think there's something wrong or totally off in terms of what it should be, I want to know that, because that makes me a little more alert in moving forward to do something else. So, and at the same time, if there's something there that you really like, I try to sort of concentrate on that aspect for future reference as well.
I don't dislike anything when it comes to music in general. But one thing I will say about your CD, one word answer: authentic. I think you guys are authentic to the music, to the lyrics, and to the composition, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And that's so
really
different,
do.
authenticity. And I'm glad you said that, Quinn, because you had mentioned earlier, Phil, about not really, following the music of the last 10 years. And
I haven't.
And I don't think we're missing anything. And I can say that.
Well, I don't, and I
send
don't want
send
people
your
to think that I
cards
have
and
any...
letters to Gary Nickerson.
That's right.
Care
Yeah.
There-
No,
of
I'm not
course there are
saying anything
exceptions.
against the
No.
music that's coming out today. But to be quite honest, I just have not had time to sit down and really, I guess, evaluate or appreciate it like I used to. And, like the top 40 countdown and that sort of thing is not what it was in the past, let's be honest.
Heavens
No.
no,
It's
not.
worlds
No.
apart. And, that was very much a part of our everyday life for many, many years. It's not so much now.
No.
And
I thoroughly
it's
enjoy. I thoroughly enjoy the replays of the Casey Kasem Top 40 countdown
I
on
do too.
CGLS now.
I
They're
do too.
they're right up my alley. The
Yep.
80s, the 70s. I mean,
Yeah.
I used to sit listening to my radio on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, whenever it was that it was on, and had my cassette player ready to go for that song that I didn't have the 45
I know
for.
exactly where you're coming from on that one.
yes.
And there's some people that are probably listening go, "What's a cassette recorder?"
Yeah, I know.
Oh, when I got my first one for Christmas, I was so excited.
I worked in a fish plant when I was 12, and yeah, one of the first things that I did was my first paycheck. I went to Rogers Furniture and I bought a radio.
Wow.
I think I just turned 13, and that radio was still on my parents' home when I left, I think.
Wow.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Now, speaking of the CD, Christmas is around the corner. Where can people find them?
Well, this is what we chose to do, right or wrong. We have one location in Yarmouth, and that's Runner's Attic. And one of the reasons for that is that Runner's Attic has always been very supportive of our efforts, and we really have appreciated that, and it's certainly no reflection on any other place in town. But in thinking back to when we did a few recordings back a number of years ago, I found that it was almost a chore to keep running from one place to another to find out, what is your stock? Do you need more? This kind of stuff. And I said, I just don't have that kind of time. I'll set them up here, and there's a location in Weymouth as well, and those are the only two locations that we have actually outside of our own resources. But I mean, if someone has difficulty getting to, for instance, Rutter's Attic, they can give me a call, and I'll make sure that they get one.
Excellent. Shameless plug for your CD. There's nothing wrong with that.
Not at all. Phil, always
Yeah.
a pleasure. We can't thank you enough.
You're most welcome. Happy to do it.
And we're looking forward to some live music again in the coming
yeah.
months.
We're all doing that for sure.
Absolutely. Got to have that.
Yeah.
And folks can...
Sounds great to
you
me.
You do get down to the farmer's market, don't you?
Well, we were, but again, they're not doing live music at the present. They did a couple things. We played for their birthday party back in the later part of the summer.
Right.
And I understand that they're planning to start, their regular Saturday morning things, which will be nice, that's for sure. But again, they're victim of all the different things that have taken place over the last year and a half or so, and it's not as easy as it was,
No,
Best thing to do is keep an eye on Facebook, and you'll post it, right?
Definitely.
Phil, thanks again.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Appreciate being asked.
I'm Gary Nickerson,
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
and this has been Outside My Window.